Hey everybody, Brian here from touringplans.com, and this is a special video because I have not just one map, but two maps. That's right, I am finally doing my Universal park-to-park plan, as many people have asked for, and as you no doubt saw in the description, so I don't know why I did this surprise thing. But obviously, park hopping is a big thing at Disney World as well. It's a little bit trickier to do a park-to-park plan because there's a lot of options with 4 parks. Universal's a little bit easier because there's only the 2. And I finally got my full color Universal Studios Florida map. Why the green is a different shade than in this one and why it is a better resolution than this one, I don't know. This is gonna be a long one. I know this already because there's a lot of permutations here and some kind of new information about early entry that we'll have to talk about when we get to that. But for now, let's just do a real quick orientation. I have done solo videos for each one of these. Universal Studios is popping over my head right now, and as soon as that one fades away, the Islands of Adventure one will pop up there. We do have quite a few touring plans that include hopping park to park, because of course at Universal Studios you have an additional advantage when you're hopping park to park in that you can ride the Hogwarts Express, and the only way you can do it is with a park to park ticket. So let's orient you here. These aren't exactly lined up the way that the real parks are. The entrance to Universal Studios Florida is down here, and the entrance to Islands of Adventure is here. Right here is the Hogwarts Express coming out of Universal Studios Florida and going into Islands of Adventure. That is by far the most fun way to switch parks. We'll start over here with Universal Studios, and we'll try not to make too many shadows. Oh, of course, here is the entrance coming in. Despicable Me right there. You can see Rip Ride Rockit right here. The New York area with Transformers. Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon right there. Revenge of the Mummy right here. It doesn't actually have an open top. That's just the way they show it on the map for whatever reason. Getting into San Francisco, the new Fast and Furious attraction right here. Down to Diagon Alley, of course, right there with the dragon perched on top of Gringotts Bank. This is the Fear Factor live show that is somehow still there. Men in Black Alien Attack right there. Down into Springfield, the Simpsons attraction, Kang and Kodos. This is Animal Actors. This back here is the more kid-friendly area with the Woody Woodpecker coaster, Curious George, Barney, E.T. right there. And then back down and out. Taking the Hogwarts Express over here to Islands of Adventure. Coming in, we have Port of Entry. This is Seuss Landing right here with Cat in the Hat. The High in the Sky trolley right there. The Lost Continent with Mythos. Not exactly sure which one of those is right, but big statue guy spitting water. Poseidon's Fury right there. Hogsmeade and Hogwarts that holds the Forbidden Journey attraction. Jurassic Park Welcome Center, Jurassic Park attraction right there. The relatively new Skull Island Reign of Kong over here. Dudley Do-Right's Ripsaw Falls. Pluto's Bilge Rat Barges. I always mess that one up when I say it, but you didn't see that, I edited it out. In Toon Lagoon, then down into Marvel Superhero Island, of course, with Spider-Man and Hulk being the headliners there. So, 2 parks, lots to do. People all ask us fairly frequently, can you see everything in one day in both parks? The answer is a qualified yes. You can definitely do the highlights package in one day, which is what our touring plan is set up for if you choose the 2 park one day option. So if you're mixing them and doing the park to park, you basically have 2 options. You can do 2 park one day, like I just mentioned, which will for the most part be a highlights tour, depending on whether you can take advantage of the early admission or not, which that I'll get to all of in a minute. Or other plans that we have are 2 park 2-day plans. Of course, you can spread your vacation out further. You can stay for 3 days, 4 days, whatever. But the principles in the 2-day 2 park plan will still hold true over multiple days. By that point, you're probably just rewriting things that you like anyway. If you can, I would recommend staying on site at one of the Universal hotels and taking advantage of the park to parks over a 2-day period. Definitely makes it easier. You can see everything, even the more minor rides and shows over a 2-day period. And staying at the Universal Resort, even if it's only for one night in between your 2 days, will give you access to the early admission hour at least one of the parks for that day. Right now, the early admission is only at Universal Studios Florida. They do not have an early admission right now at Islands of Adventure. Will that change? Yeah, probably. One thing you should definitely know about Universal, they like to make changes to their operations without really telling anyone. More on that when I start talking about what is included in the early entry hour. And if you're wondering the reason this car is here, this Ford Anglia, this is going to be the new roller coaster that is going into Hogsmeade that will open in summer of 2019. So I'm going to start with the 2-park one-day plan. Now there are 2 options for the start of every one of these plans. It is if you have early entry and if you do not have early entry. So if you are staying at a Universal resort, we highly recommend, especially if you are seeing both parks in one day, using that early admission hour. If you're not staying at one of the resorts, obviously you can't. So I'm going to do this as it is right now, which is Universal Studios having the early entry hour. If you can use the early entry, obviously you do it. You start at Universal Studios Florida. If you do not have the early entry, that's when it gets tricky, because there are 2 options. You could start at Islands of Adventure and hit some of the big attractions right off the bat, but then when you come back to Universal Studios Florida over here, you're going to have longer waits for some of this other stuff anyway. Or you could show up an hour before opening and you may actually get to ride something. This is why I'm being kind of confusing about this. Just today, I am filming this on July 31st. Just today, Seth Kuberski, one of our wonderful researchers and co-author to many wonderful unofficial guides, was at Universal Studios fairly recently. The attractions open for early entry at Universal Studios, and I use early entry and early admission kind of interchangeably. I believe it's officially early admission. It's what Disney calls an extra magic hour in the morning, basically. The attractions that had been open were Despicable Me, Minion Mayhem, Revenge of the Mummy, and Escape from Gringotts. Generally, what we actually recommended is to come in and do Despicable Me first, before going back and doing Escape from Gringotts. Reason for that is because Despicable Me loads fairly slowly, and as you can see, it is right in the front of the park. It is almost literally the first thing people see once they get into Universal Studios. And Minions are popular. Kids love Minions. Except mine. My son doesn't really like Minions anymore. I don't know why. This ride gets very busy, and it will stay busy for most of the day. But today, what they were doing, and all indications are that they are going to continue to do this for a little while. Like I said, Universal does enjoy changing this stuff with no real notice. Despicable Me was open, but not at 8 a.m. when the early entry hour started. It opened around 8:15 to 8:30, but they were letting anyone get in line for it. Even the guests that had shown up without staying at a Universal hotel, that were just there an hour early, were allowed to start queuing for Despicable Me. Around 8:30, they were also allowed to start queuing for Transformers and Shrek 4D, which is right here, although neither of those started running until 9 a.m. But they could start riding Despicable Me early. So if you were a non-resort guest, you could show up at 8, get in line for Despicable Me. As soon as that opened, ride that, then go over and get in line for Transformers to ride that as soon as it opened, then go back and do the other things, which is a pretty darn good plan, especially when you don't technically have the early entry. But what that means for those that do have it is that now your options are come in and wait with everyone else for Despicable Me, then try to head back and do Mummy and Gringotts, or skip Despicable Me, do Mummy and Gringotts, although again this morning when Seth did it, Mummy was not opening early. They were having some technical difficulties, meaning Escape from Gringotts was the only thing that actually opened at 8 a.m. Good news, he only waited, I think, 14 minutes for Escape from Gringotts, so not too bad. And we haven't really had time to look into this too much. Like I said, we just found out about this morning, but I think I would probably recommend waiting, just getting in line for Despicable Me, especially if they tell you it's going to open around 8:15. Now, if the team members there say, oh no, it's not going to open till 9, definitely don't wait for it. But if it is going to open, even by 8:30, if you're one of the first ones on, you're going to be off before 9, meaning you can still ride Revenge of the Mummy, you can still head back and get in line for Escape from Gringotts. Before 9 a.m., none of the attractions take express passes, so even the standby line will move a little bit quicker than it will later in the day. This not opening right away does throw kind of a wrench into the early entry process. The other thing that always throws a wrench into every process is the virtual lines that you find all the time at Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon, and sometimes at the Fast and the Furious Supercharged attraction. Fast and the Furious often has a regular standby line early in the morning, switching over to a virtual line when it starts getting a little busier, but they could switch back at any time. Again, Universal and their changing operations is confounding to someone whose business it is to try to figure out plans for these parks, not to mention the people who are in the park trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. The virtual line is, meaning it's basically, think of it as FastPass Plus if you're familiar with Disney. You go in, you can either go to the attractions, or even better, look at the Universal Orlando app on your smartphone, where you can, once you're in the park, you can reserve a time on one of these attractions. Now, first thing in the morning, like I said, Fast and Furious may not be giving out ride return times. You'll just kind of have to play that one by ear. Race Through New York with Jimmy Fallon always will. Now, because of the virtual lines, you can actually leave these for later in the day if you would like to, because when you come back over to the park, and yes, our park-to-park plans for single day actually have you starting and ending at Universal Studios Florida. So you can do those two towards the end of the day and reserve times later. So if you're using the early entry, and the early entry right now is only at Universal Studios, even if early entry is at both parks, I would recommend starting at the studios. There are more attractions that will be higher weight there than there are at Islands of Adventure. And the Islands of Adventure early entry, when they were doing it, was really just the two Hogsmeade attractions, Forbidden Journey and Flight of the Hippogriff. So the waits were still not that great for those because that's where everybody in the park was going. So you're starting at Universal Studios for early entry. Like I said, I'm gonna say for the purposes of this that Despicable Me will start letting people on at 8:15. So come in, get in line for that. I know it's annoying. It annoys me just talking about it, having to come in and immediately just stand in for line for attraction that isn't open. But you get on that, do Revenge of the Mummy, head back, Escape from Gringotts. Then, assuming it's around the time that Islands of Adventure will open, hop on the Hogwarts Express, take that over here, go straight to Forbidden Journey, and then start making your way around this way. You can do the Jurassic Park River Adventure if you want to. Warning, you will get pretty wet on that. Reign of Kong, Skull Island, you could do these two water attractions. You will absolutely get drenched on both of these, so keep that in mind. Spider-Man, Hulk, do the Seuss attractions, come back around. Obviously, you're gonna, eat lunch in there sometime. Then come back, take the Hogwarts Express back over. Being that you are gonna be at this park in late morning, by the time you get around to Spider-Man and Hulk, it will be 11 o'clock, noon. There will be lines there. There's just gonna be. If you're doing both parks in one day, you're gonna have to wait in lines. That's just how it's gonna work. But better to wait in longer lines for 2 or 3 attractions than all of them. So then you come back over here and you do everything else. You check out the virtual lines for Fast and the Furious Race Through New York. Depending on what those are, you pick a direction to go around. You can either go to Men in Black, Simpsons, E.T., then come back around and do Transformers, Rip Ride Rockit, Race Through New York, Fast and Furious, depending on when these return times are, or if you get quick return times, or if Fast and Furious is standby only. If they're standby only in the middle of the day, that means the line isn't super long. So then you come this way, do that first, then do Transformers, Rip Ride Rockit, back around. You get how reversing works, I'm sure. The attractions in Universal Studios Florida, the idea is to do them either first thing in the morning or towards the end of the night. That's how this works. Plus, the only nighttime spectacular they have in either park is the Cinematic Spectacular, which takes place in the lagoon right here. So you want to be here at the end of the night so you can watch that. The viewing area is right about here. Don't really have it on this map yet, but it's right there. Now, if you do not have the early admission option, then it starts actually basically the same. You get here about an hour early, you get in line for Despicable Me. The difference here is even if they will not let you on Despicable Me until 9 a.m., still wait for it. because this ride will have a 45-minute plus wait like all day long. But then after this, you're just gonna go right here, ride Rip Ride Rockit, then ride Transformers, because these were not open for the early admission. Now, like I said, today they were letting non-early admission guests line up for Transformers ahead of time. So if you do get to ride Despicable Me early, go to Transformers, line up there to ride that right away, then Rip Ride Rockit. Then you'll come over here, you can ride E.T. and The Simpsons, Men in Black. It's still fairly early in the morning, so the line shouldn't be too bad. Then you can come over and ride Hogwarts Express. You're gonna, for right now, again, you're skipping the virtual line attractions, The Mummy, and Escape from Gringotts. Because Mummy and Escape from Gringotts are open during the early admission, they're already gonna have a line built up by the time you get in at 9. There's no point in waiting in that extra line. You can do those two towards the end of the night when the lines will be more reasonable. So you take the Hogwarts Express over, pretty much the same thing here, except now it is a little bit later in the morning. So now you can kind of go either way. You can come down here and go around this way, or you can do the loop this way. You're gonna wait in lines. The lines will be a little bit longer than they were in the plan with early admission. That's just what happens when you get an hour head start on things over here. But same thing, and then you head back, you do the rides that you didn't do, watch the Cinematic Spectacular, you have a wonderful day. Now, the 2-day plan is actually pretty easy compared to what I just explained. You take one day and you start at Universal Studios, you take the other day and you start at Islands of Adventure. Then you switch halfway through the day. And that's it. Universal Studios Florida, we already explained what happens first thing in the morning for both early entry and non, so I don't need to do that again. You also probably understand what you do when you come back. You do, the first day, you do a handful of the big attractions. When you're in there in the afternoon on the second day, whatever bigger attractions you didn't get to, you do those towards the end of the night. Then you can also see some of the shows. You can also see some of the shows. Maybe you can enjoy a few more of those than you would on the one-day kind of see everything tour. But Islands of Adventure. And again, I'm not gonna go crazy with it because I did do a video about this already. But same thing. The big attractions here are Hulk, Spider-Man, Skull Island, and Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Do 2, maybe 3 of those, depending on what the wait times are the first day. Then when you come back the second day, you do the other one. I would probably, if I have 2 days, I would loop these 3 attractions, the water ones, together, because once you're wet, you might as well be really wet. Once I was on Dudley Do-Rights and with my family, and we were laughing because I found one spot under here that did not get wet, and that was literally the only spot on me. And as I was showing that, some people were on the bridge right here with the water guns that you can pay money for. I think they're still there. And as I was pointing that spot out, someone hit me right in my dry spot. Terrible. You may also want to do those either at the end of the day or if you're going back to the hotel to take a break and say change because, you know, again, super wet. And then you can take in some of the shows. Ride the smaller things like maybe 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, or the carousel over here. Things that maybe you didn't have time to ride in the one-day race for all the attractions plan. And that is it. That is the 2-park approach to Universal Studios. I would say it's not that hard, except that you know, you definitely need touring plans to do it, right? Right? So subscribe to Touring Plans and subscribe to this channel if you don't already. If you made it all the way through this and you like this sort of stuff, you're really gonna like our YouTube channel. So do me a favor and smash that like button. Don't know why, but that's what all the YouTubers my kids watch say. So do that, I guess, and be excellent to each other.